Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and this is a general update video for Project Mjolnir. Basically, Project Mjolnir is a Gofundme where I'm looking to create a real-life working version of Mjolnir Mark IV with modern-day technology and try to get as close as I possibly can in form and function as the Mjolnir Mark IV platform. The link to the GoFundMe is in the description below. If you haven't donated already, please pop across and give what you can. We've already raised about $7,000, which is incredible, but there's still so much work left to do. And if you can't donate at the moment, just share it around. That would be more than enough. Just giving it the exposure and getting it out there, because this is a project that I'm absolutely utterly convinced is going to be awesome and is going to deliver some pretty awesome stuff along the way. So, nonetheless, this is a general update video and is a mishmash of different clips and footage and just general vlogging style videos that I've put together over the past week and a bit since the project went live, just to basically get you guys up to speed on what's been going on behind the scenes. So sit back and enjoy me telling you about what's been going on. Cheers, everyone.
I stirred it for too long. That's going to be a write-off. That's a write-off. That's bollocks. Okay, so everything arrived for the 80mm by 80mm format. The 80mm by 80mm water blocks arrived. I've already got that in place here. I've got the full Peltier patch on the top of it. I put the heatsink on, I put the fan on, but it really wasn't making a whole lot of difference. So I've just taken the heatsink back off, and I found that only 2 of these Peltier pumps are actually working. So I need to identify which ones aren't working and why they're not working, and then either replace them or figure out something to do with them. So it just wasn't drawing the voltage and amp. It wasn't drawing the voltage and current that I was expecting it to draw due to what it is. So I need to figure out what's what here. So what I'm going to do is take this one here. That's going to come right the way down because I don't want to blow it up. Right, so we're going to connect negative, positive, and we're going to bring up the amps and bring up the voltage. It's now giving it 12 volts and 4 amps. And that's getting cold and frosty on the wrong side, so I'm going to have to invert the polarity. Probably something as simple as me mounting them up the wrong way. So let's try that again. Whoa! Should turn the voltage off. Didn't. Right, that's now getting hot. Okay. So that one's fine. It's funny because that one was one of the ones that wasn't working. So maybe I just had them wired weird. Inverted. Black. Oh, I didn't turn the voltage off again. Oh dear. Ow! Yep, that one's working. Okay, so they might all be working then, because these 2 were working as well. So, right, I'm going to guess then. Right, I'm going to guess. They probably weren't wired very well inside the junction. Right, okay, I'm going to have to rewire these. So. The thing is, I've already wired all this together, and I tested it, and it gave me a reading, a water temperature reading of about 17 again. So I thought, well, 4 Peltier pumps only giving me 17 degrees centigrade in water temperature, I may as well just use the one. But that's when I clocked it wasn't pulling the amount of electricity it should have been. So I probably just didn't wire them together very well. So, and it's okay to wire them like this as long as the supply gives them what they need. So, right, just shove you in there. Get in there. There. Plug that down. It's all just experimentation, really. It's not an exact science. This hasn't, hasn't been done for this purpose before, so it's all just tweaking. Where are my glasses? Ah, found them. Right, so that, I think we've done that. Right, now the negatives. Whoops. We want to be squeezed together in such a way. Tight enough. Get in there. Right. Now. Yes, it is. Let's see if I can see 4 cables at the end here now. So I tighten that down. Tighten that down as well. Right, let's try that. Invert polarity. So, positive to negative. Negative to positive. Turn the power off this time because turning all of them on simultaneously will be quite a current draw. Right, so we'll drop it down to 0. And on. Voltage at midway. Now bring it up. Right. It's already pulling 2 amps. Only 1.7 volts. It's warm. Warm. Ish. Well, I'm going to have to boot this right up, hang on. Right, voltage at max. Here come the amps. Hot. 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 Right. Good. Right, that's now working. So we've got the 80mm by 80mm water block, 4 Peltier pumps that are now working. They're heating up the top side here, which is where the heatsink needs to go, and they're cooling the bottom side, which is great, that's what it needs to do. I've just noticed that fan has been running all that time, so I must have that on this separate supply. So that needs to go onto there. I'm still using bog standard thermal paste. I saw some suggestions that I should use liquid metal, and I have got some on order. So this at the moment this is just testing, like testing protocol. That's why it's like still mishmashed together. I'm just pinning things together loosely. 1, 2. Right, so the the 80mm fan on the top there, drawing 12 volts, 1.5 amps. Peltier pumps are going to draw quite a lot more energy than that, and then I've got the radiator fan and the pump linked up to a separate supply again. So if I turn that on, we'll get those up to speed. Right, so I'm currently giving it 6 volts, 0.3 amps on those two at the moment, and that's moving semi-decent amount of air. Okay, now we turn the Peltiers on. So all the Peltiers together, when they're linked in parallel like that, draw 3.6 volts, but they draw 5 amps. Quite a lot, to be fair. I could link them in series. That would mean that they draw 12 volts, but no, they wouldn't draw 12 volts. They draw 4 times their base voltage. Okay, so I've got 4 of these going, which means it suggests to me there's one that's not working. Either that or they're all just overclocked. Probably all overclocked. I'm going to drop it down a little bit. Sorry, hang on. I don't want to burn. Excuse me, I don't want to burn them out. Okay, there's only a little bit of play in that. If you overclock them, then they backfeed their energy, and then effectively it starts heating the cold side again. You don't want that. You don't want the thermal energy to jump back across the circuit. Otherwise, you're defeating the object. Okay, so that's now operating at 3 volts, 3.75 amps. Each Peltier on their own can run on 12 volts, about 1 amp. So 4 of them, 3 volts, about 1 amp each, just under 1 amp each. So if I link them in parallel, that's what happens. If I link them in series, it'll be 1 amp. Yeah, 1 amp, but it would be 12, 24, 48 volts. I mean, really, when it boils down to it, it's just that you just put it through a transformer circuit or an inverter circuit or something along those lines to get what you want. But it's interesting that I've got this running on, so the fan and the pump is running on 6 volts. Oops, this is running on 3 volts. Circulating the water. Like I say, I've had this running, so the water's already kind of at temperature, so to speak, but it's quite a quick process. This 18mm by 18mm water block's quite large, so it's got a lot of surface area, so it cools the water quite quickly. So I think we'll be safe to take a couple of readings now. So hot side. I've got about 20 odd degrees there. I'm sure that's accurate. 1 second. 24. I'll tell you what. Yeah. 20. 24. 23. Okay, on the cold side, the block here is got 19 point. Can't decide. Apparently, it's 20 again. Let's go underneath. Sorry. Might be picking up the air that's blown out there. Okay, so that's giving me 18.8. So that's not great. The block on the top there's fairly warm, warmer than I would say 20 degrees. So I'm probably just not getting the reading from the right place. This isn't perfect for the laser. Isn't where it senses the temperature from. It's actually a little diode below it. The laser just gives you rough aim on where you're shooting. I got 25 there. Yeah, about 25 degrees there. It's 26 now. Still think it's more than that. Let's go from here. .22. The fan's doing its work. It's cooling the fins. The heatsink can only get so tall, effectively, until you defeat the object of cooling. You get no further sort of benefit from the larger blades. That's about as big as I could go with that type, and actually still get a benefit of it. Okay, so if I take the temperature from that, So the water obviously is being cooled by this, it's being pumped around, and then it's going through the radiator here. So at the top here, where this bulge is here, it's that's where the water's coming close to the surface. So in theory, that will give us a relatively accurate reading. Okay, so yesterday I'm at 17.4, I think 17.4, 17.5 with this assemblage. And today, 16.4. So it's only a degree difference, which to substantiate that's quite a big drop in temperature. But for the use of 4 Peltier pumps as opposed to using 1, it doesn't translate to a lot, and that's in and of itself that's more efficient than this as well. This wasn't anywhere near as efficient as I thought it would be. It's still leaking water. So, okay, so that one's out. The big long one, that's out. I'm not doing it. I'm not using it. This, I might leave this running for a little bit. I might go and have some, it's about midday now. Yeah, I might go and have some lunch. I'll leave this running. I'll come back and I'll do some more measurements. So, and then we'll ascertain whether or not this is kind of a worthwhile format. I mean, I don't want to chill the water too much, but it needs to be cold because it's being circulated around the torso. It needs to cool you down. That in and of itself is going to be an interesting thing as well. So I was tempted to use really fine gauge. I've actually got some reducers. Where are they? Where are my reducers? There they are. So I'm going to use these reducers. So that takes the larger gauge tubing I've got, which is all linked around there, and that drops it down to a much finer gauge. Then effectively they would be what would come out of this network and be sent around the body. Add something at the end of it. So it would be finer gauge tubing that would go around the torso, and I might even get a few more fittings yet that split this into T-junctions, so I can have the out splitting into 2 directions and then have it going around 2 separate circuits covering each half of the torso, and then it coming back, joining into a T-junction again and going back into this one to be pulled through. So that means that the tubing would be very fine gauge tubing I had at one point, and I don't know where I've put it. So I'm going to have to order more of the tubing, but you can guarantee once I've ordered it and it gets here, I'll find the old stuff. So, but hey, that's fine. So yeah, effectively then the tubing would lead around 2 different circuits, because it would go to T-junctions after these, and come out of the back unit, so it'll be like up here. This would be centre back. But come out of there, go into 2 T-junctions, probably down near the lumbar, and then it would be sent through tubing that would basically snake its way back and forth like this, all the way up, over the shoulders, under the armpits, and then back to a T-junction that would go back into the unit. That would allow cool water to be circulated around the torso. I've got a nylon webbed vest, effectively. It's like for like airsoft. That's coming, and I think I can connect the tubing to the inner surfaces of all those, because it's literally like a square hatch pattern of nylon straps. Looks a bit like a ballistic vest but with holes. So I think I can put the tubing onto the inner surface of all those, and then they would be in contact effectively with the body, but through obviously the skin tight undersuit would be buffering the difference between the two. That would circulate, in theory, pretty cold water around the torso, keep me cool on a torso. There'd also be ventilation systems in the helmet to cool down the head so you don't get too sweaty. Sweat should be dealt with by the skin tight undersuit, because it's actually moisture wicking. There was a temptation to try to actually use the liquid system closed loop like this to actually cool air. And then the air would be pumped around tubing which have tiny little holes in them. But then, okay, normal application in normal atmosphere, so to speak, that would be fine, and I might still do that because you'd be effectively getting cool, air-conditioned air blown around your torso, and that would evaporate sweat. B, that would keep you cool. That's good. The flip side to that is that if you were in applications where you had to seal down the environment systems, seeing it, say, in a toxic environment, if there was risk of gas or anything like that, smoke or small particulates in the air, if you needed to seal down your environment system, that air is now having to be effectively recycled. It would have to be recycled through the system, because if it didn't and it was just pulling air in, one, you've no longer got an environment system. You've got a major breach effectively, where it's sucking whatever it is that's in the atmosphere around you in and pumping it into your body. You don't need that. So it needs to circulate the air itself with its own little heat exchanger, which does add layers of complexity, but it would, in theory, work. The other flip side is if you go into this is down the line. But if you go into a vacuum environment, the issue that there's an issue with the water-based cooling system, but there's also an issue with an air-based cooling system. One, there ain't no air, so you can't suck anything in to cool your body down, and that also means that you need to have it vacuum rated as far as being able to seal itself, because otherwise you'd go into a vacuum and your air conditioning system would effectively suck all of the air out your suit. You just asphyxiate, rather, which is not good. The problem with the water-based cooling system in a vacuum environment is there's nothing to conduct the heat in the heat sinks away. It would only be radiative heat, which is actually massively inefficient. Most of the cooling that happens in atmosphere here is due to conduction and convection. Radiation isn't anywhere near as efficient at dumping heat. So in vacuum, there'd be no liquid medium, there'd be no oxygen, there'd be no atmosphere to diffuse the heat from the heat sinks, allowing the Peltier pump hot side to be cooled sufficiently for the cold side to get cold enough to be able to chill the water to cool the torso. But then in the same breath, in a vacuum environment, you don't really want to be cold. But in a vacuum environment, if you're in sunlight in a vacuum environment, it can get blisteringly hot. In the shadow, if you're say on the dark side, if you're in orbit and you're on the dark side of the Earth, the shadow in space can get into negative temperatures. So that's down the way. That's why spacesuits are so expensive and so complex, because they need to deal with first the vacuum effectively. They did make breathable atmosphere and pressure for the person wearing it, but they also need to regulate the extremes of temperature while also simultaneously dealing with radiation, perhaps micrometeorites and things like that, micro debris effectively travelling at hypervelocity in space that can potentially impact the astronaut. Yeah, that's why they're so expensive and why they're so complex. What I'm aiming to do is something wholeheartedly more simple. So perhaps I should keep in mind developing it for the sakes of those applications later down the line, but I think I should keep perhaps my sights set on the fundamentals of in-atmosphere usage. With provisions made for toxic environments or dusty environments or smoky environments or whatever. Basically environments where you need to seal down the environment suit. In that situation, like I say, liquid cooling, that works because it's a self-contained system and it's only using the air around you to cool the heat sink. So that can be open. That can be an open air system, independent from the environment suit. If you made it so it's air conditioned, so it's pumping cool air into the torso, that's no longer independent from the exterior around you, unless you made levels of complexity of the environment suit in order to do that. Difficult. So that's the environment suit. So I'm going to go for lunch because I'm actually getting a bit ravenous now. Before I go, I'll just quickly take some more temperatures. That's interesting. So that's now at 15.4, so that's actually 2 degrees cooler. Hot side of this, I'm still getting weird readings. 20 degrees. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll really gently just, while it's operating, I'll just slide it off a little bit. See if I can take a temperature directly from the surface of the Peltier. (28, 29 degrees-ish. So the fan's doing well at keeping the temperature down, which is great. Because the hot side can get hot enough to be uncomfortable. Like, so when I put my finger on it earlier, it was hot to the touch, to the point that, you know, I couldn't keep my finger there for very long. So it's doing a good job of keeping things cool, which is great, because that means the cold side can get colder, which in turn means, like I say, it's 15.3 now. So that's actually still getting colder. So I might leave this to run, because this might end up being a worthwhile trade-off. I hate seagulls. And even if I don't do the 4 Peltier pumps, I could perhaps do 2. A bit of a trade-off, because then I've got reduced voltage and reduced current requirement, but I've still got more heat, more cooling than just the one. But this was still, I like that it was that small and that simple. Ugh, that's got water in it too. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it run. I'll be back and I'll see what the results are, and then we'll move on to the hinges for the knees. And the fact that I'm going to have to retrofit these to these and try to figure out exactly how I'm going to do that. I think I've got something in mind, but I'll get back to you. I'm back. It's about half an hour later. Near as damn it, exactly half an hour later. So let's do some readings. Still getting the weird 20. 23, 23, 20. Again, the fan is doing a pretty good job at cooling the heatsink. Excuse me, cold side. Okay, so I'm getting 17.9 on the block itself. However, (15.8, 15.7), somewhere between that mark. So it's actually warmed back up marginally. 16 degrees block. (16 degrees tubes. Motor was running at 20. 16. 15. Okay, so 15 degrees centigrade. So, well, 15.5 degrees centigrade. So with 4 Peltiers, I can get this, yeah, with 4 Peltiers I can get this down to 15.5 degrees. With the 1 Peltier array, I could get it down to 17.5 degrees, so I'm actually 2 degrees colder with this. But yet the 4 that I had before, I could only get it down to about 18.5, nearly 19. So that's definitely out. That's better. This seems to be better still. So now I need to make a decision as to whether or not I'm going to go whole hog and just go with this and figure out how how I'm going to sort the circuit boards out so that I get power to the larger quantity of Peltier pumps, because, well, it's going to cost more energy basically. Or if I experiment with maybe just 2, or I just play around and see kind of what I can work out. Another trick is figuring out exactly where where things are going to rest. So at the moment this is all on, and yet volume wise negligible. So it's actually very, very quiet. It's whisper quiet. If I bring you over, so we have. This is the 80mm fan with the large 80mm heatsink on here, which is actually warm to the touch. Yep. But then under here we've got the Peltier pumps and then 80mm water block on the bottom. We've got quick release valves just so I can swap out different assemblages quickly and without losing too much water. I've got my water tank back here. We've got a single 80mm fan on an 80mm radiator to dump excess heat, and then we got our little micro pump here. Really simple system. And in theory, you could even argue that effectively where the water block is, or the water tank is, or even like before it, so between this quick release valve and the water block, is where the water would be circulating around the body after going through some drop down valves to drop the tubing size down to a smaller gauge. So that isn't bad, and it's like I say, it's whisper quiet if I get you quite close. Really, the loudest part of it is actually the radiator fan. So that's a pretty good result. And we're averaging it 15.6. I have no idea why it's backwards, by the way. I saw a question before, like, why is the image backwards? I don't know. I'm filming on my phone and this is the way it is. So it's backwards, I could flip it, but so yeah, I need to make some decisions basically, because the longer I stand around here and guess and and ah and don't make any executive decisions, the longer time goes on and I don't get anything done. So I need to decide if I want to do a single Peltier with this kind of a format and the radiator to deal with the water, deal with the cooling system, which obviously comes with trade-offs. It can only, at least by my measurements, it can only get it down to about 17.5 degrees. Meanwhile, this can get down to about 15.5 degrees, but there's 4 Peltier pumps here. So I need to make the decision, do I go with something smaller? Do I go somewhere in between the two where I only use 2 Peltier pumps? Or do I go with this assemblage here, which is more energy hungry? I mean, so the 80mm fans, the pump, that's all of it, isn't it? 2 80mm fans and the pump are taking, well, these are currently taking 6 volts and 3 amps, which isn't bad. Low speed, whisper quiet, not very energy hungry, that's great. The Peltier pumps, however, are taking 3 volts at nearly 4 amps. So in theory, if I had a distribution network that had, so that's taking 3 volts but at 4 amps, that's consuming 6 volts at 0.3 amps. So if I doubled the voltage on that would be 6 at half the amps, which would be nearly, well, about 2 amps. I might be able to do that actually. I might be able to do that. What would happen if I put all of it on one circuit? By one circuit, I mean like power all of it with just one power supply. Find out. I'm gonna find out. Right. Right, it's all off. I need to quickly do some minor rewiring. bear with me a second. So that's the 12mm. Yeah, that's 12mm thing. So that needs to go one in there, two in there. Okay, so in theory, that cable goes to the bottom power supply. So if I remove those two there, see that's the top power supply. Ugh. Get hold of this. Plug this into the bottom power supply. So that's two cables now coming out of the bottom power supply, two outputs. So they're on the same circuit, they're just two outputs, that's all. Reverse the polarity for Peltiers. Black. Red. Right, these, in theory, are now all powered on the same circuit. Don't know if this is a good idea or not, but we're going to find out. Experimentation. It's all experimentation. So if I just drop everything down to 0 before I turn this thing on, right, when I turn this on, nothing should happen. Good, that's progress. Right. Right, let's try this. I'm going to bring the amps up, slowly increase the voltage. Nothing's happening. Okay, the volts are at max. Oh, I got movement out one of the fans then. Okay, so this one for some reason isn't moving. Oh, it is now. That's not very fast. That's nowhere near fast enough to do what it needs to do. Right, I'm going to put that on a separate circuit if it's all the same. Okay, the pump's working. It's circulating a really small amount of water very slowly. I'm going to put that on a separate one. Sorry, 1 second. So that can go on to. Sorry, 1 sec. There. That can all come down. I'll destroy the bloody fan. On, voltage up. Okay, so that's operating at 12 volts at 0.07 amps. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so the rest of this circuit now, the pump is pumping, slowly, but it's pumping. The fan on the radiator is spinning. And the Peltiers are working. This one's on its own separate circuit for some reason. This is on 12 volts, 0.07 amps. So with a circuit, so that's okay. So this is actually gradually going up. I think it's due to the resistance change in the Peltiers as they warm up. Yeah, that's very slowly going up. So we're at 4.5 volts. We're at 5 amps. This is at 12 volts, 0.07 amps. So if I halved that, that would be 6 volts, but it would be 0.14 amps. That's really peculiar. That's a really peculiar rating for a fan. adjusting the amps does nothing. Increasing the voltage doesn't even change its RPM, so okay. Oops. So 12 volts, 0.07. Half of that would be 6 at 0.14. Well, I could do it in thirds actually. So 12 because there's 3 4s in 12. I'm sorry, I'm working this out because of the way that transformers and inverter circuits work effectively. So if we do it in thirds, 12 volts, 4 goes into 12 3 times, so that would mean the amp would increase by 3, so 0.07 would go to what, 0.21 amps? Which would, in theory, if I added that into the same circuit, so I could put it all off the same power supply. You have to come off of all of the same power supply, but I'd need to have a step, like an inverter circuit for this fan. You see, that would just get a different fan because that's a really peculiar rating for the fan. And that would make it, in total, required energy level then would be about 4 volts, and it would be 5.33 amps, plus or minus 10% basically. And then, like I said, that would come off as a single power supply would have to be 4.5 volts, 5.33 amps. Then there'd be a separate circuit that would come off of it to power each of these devices respectively. The good thing is the pump and the fans in theory rate about the same, so that they could all come off one circuit, and then the Peltiers are powered by the rest of it. This could work. This could work. Right, okay. Right, okay, so we're back to our original question. Do I go with small and simple at 17.5 degrees? Do I go whole hog at, we'll check. Interesting, so the temperature's actually increased slightly, it's now 15.8. (28 degrees on the hot side, 19 degrees on the cold there, at least. Yeah, 15.8 degrees. Drop of 2 degrees. So do I go with 17.5 with 1, 15.8 with 4, or do I do a 2 somewhere in between? I think the only way I'm going to get an answer for this question, I could get the stuff I need to do a 2. But in order to answer that question sufficiently, I'm going to have to get tubing to do the step down that would go around the torso, and I'm going to have to get the vest in order for the tubes to go round. I'm going to have to wear it. So I'm going to have to rig this to actually pump water around a vest to cool my torso. Then, with that on, I would then test the 2 different types. I would test the 1 and I would test the 4. And see which one's more comfortable, because obviously then it's actually being used and my body heat is being dumped into the water, it's being cycled to the system, then we can see how efficiently it's dumping heat and transferring cool water back to me. It's the only way I'm going to get an answer. Practical testing. Energy requirements wise, there's not a lot in it. And I could figure out a way to do it. Yeah, it's going to have to be practical tests. Right, practical tests. Right, so I got the vest coming. I'm going to order some more tubing. The new tubing should arrive with me tomorrow morning-ish, if I order it soon. And then I could just, well, I think the vest is still not due for. I think the earliest it said is April 20 something, 23rd, 24th, something like that. So end of the week. Okay, practical test it is. Right, so okay, for the environment suit, the cooling part of the environment suit for now is kind of on back burner until I receive the tubing and the vest, so I can actually do some practical tests of the two different setups. I'm going to keep those two setups nearby, so that's the 1. 4 is still plugged in. Yeah, I'm not going to get any more answers from that for the time being, so that can go off. That's fine, right, okay. Without effing too much up, I'm going to gently move this out of the way. Right, yeah. I'm going to have to, that's on back burner, I'm going to have to deal with that later, when the other stuff arrives. Okay, so, okay, refocus. Right, so the other thing we've got is obviously the skeletal. I noticed people found it interesting that I said skeletal as opposed to skeletal. Usually you say skeletal when it's in reference to like the musculoskeletal system. And I just got into the habit of saying skeletal, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? That's all that freaking matters. Knee hinges, knee joints. These are for the knees. Very simple. 2 strips of aluminium, I think, or steel. These were bought as like this, so these aren't me. I didn't create these. It's quite stiff. I'd say that's probably steel, to be honest, although it's not very heavy. It's probably aluminium. Either way, it's nice and rigid. So yeah, it's good. So two arms of aluminium. They have a geared face on the within this piece here. There's 2 plates that are sandwiched together, and these 2 points of rotation where the 2 arms effectively come to pivot point. So they actually slide across each other as opposed to just bend. So the center of bend, center of rotation, so to speak, is actually here, roughly where my finger is. That's where the actual center of rotation is. But when you've got it on, it kind of slides like the knee joint would slide. So if this is your femur, then when you bend your knee, it doesn't bend, a hard hinge 90-degree angle. It's offset. That's for the knees. I need to retrofit those to the bars that I've already cut. What's great is that when I bought these, I should have. I didn't measure up. I sort of eyeballed it and thought, yeah, they'll be about right. Well, they're actually exactly the same diameter as the support structure. So another problem we've got to bear in mind is when you're wearing this. They found me. When you're wearing this, it's going to be against the outer layer of the environment suit. You don't need that catching. You don't need any sharp edges or anything like that could damage the environment suit. So using bolts and like normal hex bolts and things like that isn't going to work, because they're going to have sharp edges, or at least edges that are going to catch, and we don't need that. So what I'm probably going to do is, you notice on these there's like a riveted face on one side, which is nice and smooth, and there's like a buttoned face on the other side. That's the other side of the rivets, basically. Although they're not sharp, there's still enough perhaps to catch the environment suit. So the likelihood is I'm going to have to make it so the button side, the smooth side, is inward. Just cock a leg up here. Typical wear jeans too bloody tight. Well done. So that would go onto there. That's actually bent at quite a nice angle. So that would go onto here, and then frame would go underneath. This is actually the hip when I cut it too long, with the implication that I would have to cut it down to size. I got plenty of stock and I can buy more. It's fine. So that's going to have to be bolted onto there to allow the weight to be distributed effectively. I've just literally at lunchtime I ordered some M6 6mm hex screws. And the reason I did that is because the combined thickness of these two components is 7mm. So the idea is I'm going to drill a few holes into here, which would go all the way through to the metal underneath as well. They go all the way down through, and then you'd bolt the hex screws to that, but they would not come all the way out the other side. I'd need to tap some screw holes into those. Obviously they're not arriving until tomorrow, but it's good to be prepared. So I'd need to tap holes into these with an M6, which I have here somewhere. That's the 6, I think. Yeah, that's your M6. That's a 1mm thread. So that's your M6 tap. So I'd have to tap that so it's actually got a thread, and then tap that as well, and then the two would be bolted together. That would then provide a good structure. Then I'd need to get the hinges for the ankles sorted. I'd need to get the hinge for the outer hip here, which is going to be one point of rotation. Then we're going to have a curved joint which would come effectively sort of around like that to the centre of the glute. And there would be another centre at another point of rotation. Those two themselves would also be kind of free moving, able to tilt, so that you can tilt with the hip, so to speak. And that would connect to a lumbar plate, and then the lumbar plate would go up to around the waist, where we'll have one of these, but I'll bend it, form it around. I might have to cut it into two halves and get it joined or hinged or something like that. But it would bend around at the waist, and then there would be another one, which would be about here, and that will be bent around the chest, the lower chest. There would probably also be an intermediate bar somewhere in between as well here. Then the trick is that obviously you're going to need a weight-bearing system, able to take the weight of the upper suit, but while simultaneously allowing full freedom of movement and range of motion here without pinching or pulling the spine in any particularly unpleasant way, because obviously with the spine it's a compound joint and its centre of rotation is within the body, so you need to mimic that rotation outside of the body. And I've got a couple of ideas in mind. I've already tested one in a very crude prototype, scaled prototype about this big, about a year ago, and it just actually used syringes like this, like that. Effectively, it was a closed loop hydraulic system. So it was a ring with several of these. I probably have it somewhere. I'd have to find it. There's a ring with several of these positioned around the perimeter, and they would connect at the top here to another ring. So the top ring would effectively be the chest, lower ring would effectively be the waist, and then you fill them with fluid, but only have them at 50% flex or 50% full, so to speak. So all of them are half full. They're all also independently linked to their opposite. So it's not exactly like this, but if you had one at the front of the abdominal, you'd have another one at the spine here, and those two would be linked. Their outputs would be linked with fluid through the tube, so that if you bend forward and it compresses the one at the front, that pushes the fluid out around the circuit and expands the one at the back, thereby giving you that kind of floating center of rotation. It's not quite like that. It's actually that they're usually offset and they're usually at a bias. They're usually at an angle. So these are older ones. I was going to use these for the Achilles a while ago. These are too big diameter wise. They're a 25mm bore. Too big. So I've ordered, along with the screws, I've ordered a shed load of pistons like this with a 16mm bore and with a 50mm stroke distance. And these would be mounted effectively between the waist band to a center abdominal point here. And these will obviously be at half articulation. They would be filled with a fluid, and that fluid would come out of, so the top one here would be sealed, this bottom one here would be open, and that would have a tube coming out of it. So again, same principle. If we go with the principle of it being one in front here, then there'll be one behind, and those two will be linked together. But it won't be. It'll be offset at an angle, at a bias. This top part here would connect to a very small ball and socket joint, or a hinge, like a compound hinge, that would then join to a center abdominal plate, which would be floating effectively mid-abdominal, like that. There'll also be another one back here. And then on top of that plate, there'd be the inverse, like this, but again at a bias going to the chest plate, the chest strap, lower chest strap, which means that if I bend forward, there's two layers of contraction at the front. So I bend forward, those two would contract. At the back, the two at the back would open up. That would allow forward flex, rear flex, and side flexion. On top of that, the waistband, and I'm probably going to do the chest band as well, are also going to be, they're going to have a bearing, a linear bearing, that would allow twist rotation. Initially I was thinking just to do it on the waist, but I've realised there's obviously quite a good degree of twist and torsion in the spine itself when you rotate like this. You can actually keep this, you can keep it if you buffer against something, you can twist, but your hips remain stationary. So in order for those to be facilitated bearings, so then you've got the twist function. Now you've got twist and you've got full range of bend motion in all directions, but also because it's fluid, because fluids are non-compressible, at least in normal circumstances, it will take weight. So on the chest ring that would be around here, any weight that's put onto that will be pushed down into the pistons, but because they're all being pushed down simultaneously in all directions by the weight, the fluid is non-compressible. It holds the weight. It becomes effectively a solid shaft. It moves, it articulates, but it's a solid shaft. That would then distribute the weight from the torso down through this structure into the waist, which would then channel all of that weight down through the legs via the large support structure. This part will be passively powered. So that philosophy, that idea of contraction around the abdominal area is all passively powered, because it effectively, there's no active element to it. It still requires your muscle effort in order to bend, but it assists you in the process. Same with this. I'm probably going to use something really simple, something like I used for the Achilles, which I should really have a version of it out here, and I don't. They're probably both in my office. Something really simple, like positioning effectively a large elastine rubber band, effectively, or like a J cable kind of thing, if you know what I mean. I'll put an image up, but it would connect here. It would go across the front of this, so I'd have to build something out here so it actually holds it in a kind of a cradle. It'd go across the front and down and connect here, which means effectively it's being forced to be straight, but when you put muscle effort into it, it will bend, but it will always bring you back to zero, so to speak. That would be similar to most other joints in the body. That's passive power. It still requires your muscle input, but it assists you to some degree. The active part of controlling that comes later on with articulators, linear actuators, servo motors, and electroactive polymers, but that's a way down the line yet. In the short term, we need to get the skeletal structure finished. I also need to spend the remainder a bit of time on the sewing machine to get the skin tight undersuit sort of finished, somewhere near finished, and then I need to decide how the hell I'm going to be positioning the muscle pads. I think I've got a few ideas as to how I'm going to do that. But so that needs to be finished. We can't go back to the environment suit. I can get the other components of the environment suit, like the waterproof layer and the other layers that are going to be required. The vest that's going to actually be mounted and stuff like that, with all the tubing. That's coming. But it still needs to wait, basically. So I can work on that when that all arrives. I can get the other stuff I need in the meantime. I'm not going to know for certain whether or not the environment system is going to work functionally as I intend it to until such time as I actually receive the other components. This needs to be done now, really. And obviously I've still got the helmet systems inside, like the laser-based pico projector for the HUD. And I need to be looking at the electronic suite for being able to hear outside of the helmet, to be able to talk outside of the helmet, lights, basic computational system, and whatever else is needed, mission camera. Yeah. Busy. Very busy. Right, I'm going to get on and start doing this. I'll touch base with you. It's probably going to be tomorrow when I've got stuff actually starting to come together and look like it makes sense. Oh, and the hinges I designed. I've adjusted the size, I've adjusted the gauges, it now fits, the bearings fit, I'll show you that in a minute. The bearings and thrust bearings fit perfectly, it supports weight, so in theory they can work for any hinge joints. And then I need to get on and, yeah, actually put it all together. So, yeah, I'll touch base soon, okay?